What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Charles Oliveira manager reveals return date. There's been no shortage of talk lately regarding Charles Oliveira and whether he'll battle Islam Makhachev next. While it remains to be seen if that happens, it's clear Do Bronx is chomping at the bit to fight again. Following Arman Tsarukyan's withdrawal from UFC 311 and his rematch with Makhachev, Dana White said that the contender will need to secure another victory before he gets tapped for a title shot. That's left many wondering if Oliveira could be booked to rematch the champion, and Do Bronx has said that he's ready for the challenge. And before we continue, make sure to leave a like on the video to help support the channel. Well, more recently, Oliveira's manager, Douglas Lima, spoke with MMA Fighting, and while doing so, Lima shot down the idea of a rematch between Oliveira and Tsarukyan, and acknowledged that they're hoping for a title fight. Lima also made it clear that Oliveira wants to fight fairly soon. I spoke with Charles a lot and he told me, Lima, I won't want to wait a whole year. I want Makhachev in the middle of the year. I want the belt. But if Makhachev only fights in October, I don't want to stay out for a year. I would like to be fighting in the summer against Max Holloway for the BMF belt, to stay active, to fight for a belt, to put on a big fight I deserve, and then fight Makhachev. But if Makhachev really fights in July, that's exactly what I want. Others have also proposed the idea of Holloway defending the BMF belt against Oliveira. What's also interesting though is that recently Chael Sonnen claimed that Oliveira isn't actually all that keen to rematch Makhachev. Via his YouTube channel claimed the following: Charles does not want to fight Islam. They've tried to act like Charles has his opportunity as a way of forcing him into it, and he ultimately showed them who has the real choice and didn't show up for the fight. That's just what happened. The idea of booking Charles and Islam is a little bit complicated in the first regard. You better not make that your main event. What do you think of Sonnen's comments here? It certainly sounded like Oliveira wants to fight for the lightweight gold again. But what do you think? Joe Rogan wants changes in the UFC. Rogan is a massive MMA fan and a lifelong martial artist, but the polarizing commentator has never been shy about advocating for various changes to the unified MMA rule set. If you're new to MMA, you may not know that Rogan's martial arts journey started with karate and taekwondo, and that he ended up competing in full contact tournaments. Later in life, however, he fell in love with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and eventually earned his black belt. So the now 57-year-old has been somewhat of a fighting purist through the grappling lens for years. He prefers rules that benefit ground fighting, more similar to the early days of MMA. Well, during a recent episode of his podcast, he had former UFC light heavyweight champion Yuri Prochazka on. And while talking about fighting, Rogan once again shared his belief that MMA bouts should take place without a cage.
I don't think they should even have cages. I think it should be an open floor. I think it should be an open floor like a basketball court.
Yeah,
because I think
was the best. Yeah,
the cage allows you to get up when you wouldn't ordinarily be able to get up. You could wall walk it. The cage allows someone to press you up against an unnatural object. There's a cage there, so you could press a guy up against a cage. Whereas if you were standing in the center, you could do Muay Thai sweeps. You could rotate around each other. There'd be more action.
It's an interesting concept, and there have been events over the years that have taken place without a cage. But given where the sport is today and how synonymous the cage and the octagon is with MMA, the chances of the UFC going this route are slim to none. Rogan also repeated his assertion that if a round ends with the fighters on the ground, the next round should begin with the competitors in the same position.
I also think if someone takes you down at the beginning of the first round, at the end of the round, you're on your back, you start that second round in the same position.
From an old school no-holds-barred perspective, this makes a lot of sense. But since a lot of casuals still whine and complain that the second a bout heads to the floor, don't expect this rule change anytime soon, if ever. Rogan has also talked in length over the years about the problem with MMA gloves and how they leave the door wide open for nasty eye pokes. This time around, however, Rogan proposed that fighters have their fingers wrapped.
No reason to have these fingers exposed. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't help grappling. You never grapple like this, right? You never use the fingers.
No.
Nobody does. You do this, or you do this, or you do different things with your hands, but your fingers they're always closed.
Still the feeling.
I understand, but the problem is the pokes, because everybody does this because you're used to sparring with gloves on.
So allow the eye pokes. Yeah.
There's no doubt eye pokes continue to be a huge problem. But what do you think of Rogan's proposals, and do you see any of them being implemented? Khamzat sends a warning to the middleweight division, revealing that he's coming for the belt in 2025. He wrote on Twitter saying, 2025 I will take this belt inshallah and no one can stop it. He then posted a picture of himself with a wolf and the UFC belt in its mouth. It's clear that Khamzat is making a run for the title, and it's possible he's already got confirmation from the UFC that he's next up. Aljamain Sterling talks about next UFC fight. Aljamain Sterling came up short in his scrap with Movsar Evloev this past December, but the former bantamweight champion is not abandoning his goal to hoist the UFC's featherweight crown. Sterling was booked to face the surging contender at UFC 310, following his unanimous decision win over Calvin Kattar in April. Although the fight was competitive, all three judges scored the contest for Evloev. As it stands right now, it's not clear when and who Sterling will face next. Was on hand at a recent karate combat event. While discussing his fight with Evloev as well as his future with MMA Junkie, Sterling said this: "I feel great. A lot of fans don't think I lost that fight. I've watched it back a couple times now. I still don't think I lost that fight. Obviously, whatever the judges say is going to stay in the history books. I would love to run it back with him, or if not, maybe fight Arnold Allen, Brian Ortega. I want to fight up. I don't really want to fight down, but if I have to prove my worth again, then it is what it is. I'm still chasing that gold. If I can get a second gold belt, that's another legacy thing that people can't take away from me. So I'm chasing history at this point." Given that Ortega has talked repeatedly about moving up to lightweight, that matchup may not be an option for Aljamain Sterling. But would you be down to see Sterling fight Arnold Allen, who's coming off a unanimous decision victory over Giga Chikadze? And if so, who do you see winning that fight? Israel Adesanya was seen taking down 4 fighters in a row while preparing for his fight at UFC Saudi Arabia. Izzy looks strong and prepared for his fight with Imavov and is working on his grappling and takedown technique. Here's the clip. Tony Ferguson breaks silence on GFL signing. Following his 8th straight loss in August, Tony Ferguson signaled he was not going to listen to the widespread calls for him to hang up the gloves. Well, now we know where El Cucuy is going to be fighting next. Recently, the new Global Fight League held its inaugural draft, and Ferguson was picked up by the Los Angeles team. Here was the reaction the former UFC interim lightweight champ posted following his addition to the team. Ferguson did take issue with the GFL graphic, which had his record incorrect. The GFL's first season is set to get underway in April. Do you see Ferguson finally ending his losing skid? And are you excited to see the now 40-year-old throw hands again? UFC updates. Let's take a look at some news regarding the UFC roster and upcoming fights. Recently, it was reported that Clay Guida's name no longer appears on the UFC roster. In December, the 43-year-old Guida was submitted by Chase Hooper, which was the Carpenter's 3rd straight loss. Well, more recently, the Cardio Machine confirmed his near 20-year-long run with the UFC has come to an end, but he will fight again. Here's some of what he had to say via social media. "There's nothing I enjoy more than stepping into the octagon and fighting for our fans. I'm truly grateful to Dana White and his outstanding staff for giving a kid with average skills but above average work ethic the opportunity to fulfill his dreams as a wrestler and mixed martial artist. This is not my retirement. This is simply a thank you for now and a passing of my UFC torch to the next generation of warriors and wrestlers. We were built to last. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The best is yet to come. Straight to the top, because wrestling is life. Now let's go fishing." If you're wondering, Guida made his UFC debut back in October of 2006. Not many people on this planet can say that they competed in the world's best cage fighting promotion for nearly 2 decades. Up next, Nolan King recently reported that the UFC's February 22nd card has undergone a change, as Antonio Tricoli has withdrawn from a bout with Mansour Abdul Malik. Nick Klein, who secured a UFC deal in October while competing on Dana White's Contender Series, has answered the short notice call. Abdul Malik, meanwhile, is coming off his successful Octagon debut in November as he put away Dusko Todorovic in the opening round. Abdul Malik is also a DWCS alumni as he received the UFC contract back in August. Speaking of Contender Series winners, Marcel Dorff recently reported that following his victory on the last round of the series, Daniel Frunza has been tapped to face Reese McKee on April 5th. The UFC is holding a fight night card in Vegas that day. McKee, who won championships with both Bama and Cage Warriors, is still in search of his first UFC win. The Northern Ireland fighter has gone 0-4 to date in the octagon and is likely in need of a win to remain on the roster. Conor McGregor agrees to fight another opponent. As we head into the second month of 2025, there's still no word as to if and when Conor McGregor will fight again. But in the latest twist of all the drama and speculation surrounding the controversial fighter, McGregor is claiming that he's fighting Jeremy Stephens next. Stephens competed in the latest BKFC card this weekend and proceeded to stop former UFC and Bellator lightweight champion Eddie Alvarez. After his win, McGregor, who's a part owner of the BKFC, proceeded to face off with Stephens in the ring and called for a scrap with Lil Heathen. If you're an old school fan, you know that McGregor and Stephens have traded numerous verbal jabs over the years, ever since McGregor's now famous "Who the is that guy?" line way back in 2016. McGregor's challenge apparently didn't end there, as BKFC president David Feldman proceeded to tell the media that the former UFC champion insists he's fighting Stephens next.
As I was walking out of the arena, Conor actually tapped me on the shoulder, and he told me to make sure that I tell everybody that he's fighting Jeremy Stephens in BKFC. That's what he said. I don't know if it's happening. I'm telling you, Conor just told me that he's fighting Jeremy Stephens in bare knuckle.
What does Stephens have to say about what went down following his win? The heavy-handed fighter acknowledged he's on board with the idea, while taking a poke at McGregor at the same time. Old Conor, he's got a long path, bro. It's all good promotion. I love it. I love to come in there right in front of his face and have him doubt me. I feel like David Feldman and him were up against me. Everybody was up against me. I came to another city. To feel this kind of resolve, like Israel Adesanya said, everybody doubted me. Everybody had me out. I went up to somebody else's city and took out another king. Stephens wasn't the only person this weekend to make comments and or allegations about McGregor using MMA manager Ali Abdelaziz posted this comment in response to McGregor claiming the Nurmagomedov family are not fighters following Usman Nurmagomedov's win over Paul Hughes on Saturday. You are a drunk addict. You should not talk about anyone real Irishman embarrassed of you. Talk about use aside, if you rolled your eyes after seeing McGregor call out Stephens, don't worry, you're not alone. Over the last 2 years, McGregor has called out and or said he's fighting the likes of Michael Chandler, Dan Hooker, KSI, Jake Paul, and most recently, he drove hard for a boxing match with Logan Paul. It should be noted McGregor was actually booked to fight Chandler last summer before a broken toe sent him back to the sidelines. Now, if we pretend UFC contractual obligations are no longer an issue, do you want to see McGregor throw hands with Stephens in bare-knuckle boxing? Islam Makhachev interested in fighting Justin Gaethje. As the MMA world continues to buzz about who Islam Makhachev will fight next, the lightweight king has let it be known that Justin Gaethje is at the top of his list. As you surely know, Makhachev is coming off a quick submission win over Renato Moicano, who replaced Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 311. Tsarukyan was forced out at the last minute due to a back injury. Following UFC 311, there's been a lot of talk about Makhachev fighting Charles Oliveira again, in large part due to the fact that Dana White has said Tsarukyan will need to secure another victory before he's rebooked for a title shot. But while talking with Usha Taika recently, Makhachev relayed he would prefer to battle Gaethje over Oliveira or Tsarukyan. I like this idea because I haven't fought Justin yet. I've already fought Oliveira and Arman, and preparing for the same opponent is not such a big motivation. But if Gaethje shows himself well in the next fight, we can meet. You can understand why Makhachev feels this way, as he's not the only fighter to admit they weren't super keen to fight someone they've already defeated. But would the UFC go with Gaethje if he beats Dan Hooker on March 8th at UFC 313? If Gaethje records an electrifying win? Maybe? While he's ranked number 3 right now, he's not far removed from his unstoppable KO loss to Max Holloway in April. And it wasn't all that long ago that Oliveira tapped him out. Makhachev was also asked about the recent head-turning comments he made about the possibility of moving up to middleweight to pursue another belt at 185. Here was some of what the Galaxy-class fighter reportedly had to say. My height allows it. I think my physical data allows it too. I'm not saying that I can 100% finish Du Plessis, but watching his fights, watching his style, I think I have the keys to victory. How about that? Du Plessis has already scoffed at the notion that Makhachev can hang with him. But what do you think? Do you see a path for Makhachev to defeat DDP? And what if Sean Strickland reclaims the middleweight crown next month at UFC 312? The MMA community was quick to fire back at Islam, claiming that he's ducking competition like Arman Tsarukyan and Charles Oliveira by calling out Justin Gaethje. We know that Islam is well respected and is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter, but a lot of people took what he said out of context. Islam talked about wanting to fight a fresh matchup and has no problem fighting whoever in the lightweight division. But if it was up to him, he would prefer the winner of Dan Hooker versus Justin Gaethje because it's something new. But the MMA community saw a quote of him calling out Justin and ran with it without looking into the context. Here's what the community had to say. If you think this bum isn't trying to duck tough competition, you're fooling yourself. Exact same playbook as Khabib. Justin's odds would be same as Moicano's. Boring match. R1 sub. No one cares about you beating Gaethje. Clueless call out. Justin has almost zero chance of winning. Charles and Arman have a real chance of winning. We'd all rather see you fight people who can win. Gaethje is the easiest matchup for Makhachev in the top 10. He has okay TDD but the worst jiu-jitsu. Fish out of water. Makhachev can choose whatever sub he wants. Give us Oliveira rematch. LMAO, what? Gaethje, a bum. He was nowhere near getting another title shot. Fool just got dominated for 25 minutes and slept cold by Holloway and he wants him next. Get the out. Go rebook Oliveira 2 or Arman 2. Even Topuria is deserving of the title shot over Gaethje. I don't think I want to see Gaethje fight for the title again. Dana White, please don't agree to this. No shot he's trying to duck Oliveira, Sarukian, or Topuria, right? Either of those three need to be his next opponent. Not Gaethje, who's coming off a brutal KO and wouldn't have a fight in over a year's time.